You guys didn't have to do any kind of reverse lookup?
We didn't set that up.
We did set up a first
Yeah.
lookup, actually. We did. It wasn't a requirement, but we did.
Yeah.
Okay, why'd you decide to do that?
Just because it was some fun to.
You didn't have enough to do anyways?
Yeah, we actually knocked off on Wednesday because we were done.
Okay. So, you're using the Win server, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Why are you using the Wins?
Just,
Bias resolution.
Why do you need, don't you have DNS to resolve this stuff?
Well, yeah, but with the, what was it, the RS6000?
Right.
It can only
Legacy
resolve
system.
names by net bias, and that was our client server. So
Database.
we needed a win so that it could communicate.
it can't read WINs, but we had to set up static mapping records in WINs in
So
order
you
for
had
it
to-
to resolve.
Because of that system, only using that BIOS, you had to toss in the Wins.
Pretty much.
Right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could have ran the DNS.
Yeah, we could just read DNS at the time.
Okay, so that machine is non-WINS compliant, right? So the static mapping did what for you?
Well, it can resolve by net bias, but not through wins. And so in wins, we had to actually put its net bias name in the win server so that everybody could talk to it.
Okay, so you put in the static mapping
Yeah.
of that particular
Of that
machine.
particular machine, right?
So putting in a static mapping allows which clients to use that name? Static mapping lets a WINS client, because they go to the
Connect to a
WINS, and
yeah.
resolve it to that. Does that RS machine have to resolve net BIOS name of your WINS clients?
No.
That machine never has to send
No,
back?
we didn't have any
anything?
Wednesday clients.
You didn't have to do any kind of a setup for that machine to resolve a net BIOS name of one of your other machines?
Well, since we didn't really have the RS6000, we didn't really test or implement any part of that.
Part of the
So it's-
requirements
In
is
theory.
all the clients ran XP Pro.
Right. All the clients run XP, but that machine never ever has to know any name resolution process for itself.
The only time it would need to do that is if DNS goes down.
Okay, so DNS goes down, it has to do that. So how's it gonna resolve those names? Well, it won't matter because it's not using DNS anyways, you just said
Yeah.
that it. So how would it resolve any other net BIOS names? How does that RS resolve net BIOS names? It's gonna have to resolve net BIOS name at some point in time.
Yeah.
I don't
What
think we
you
ever
have to
got,
implement for it to
I
resolve
don't
net
think we ever
BIOS.
got the chance to implement and work on that problem.
We do a little
That's one
research
of
and
the
I'll get back to
problems
you on that.
Okay. Look up the proxy agent.
Okay. Okay.
The WINS proxy agent.
Yeah, didn't you do the proxy agent?
Yeah, I forgot about
Well, I figured you did. I'm trying to get you to remember. All right. You guys use the CSV file, right? Okay. So your problem with the CSV file was what that caused you to do 2 batch files.
CSV file, you can't set passwords.
Okay.
You can only do that with a batch file using the DS add or the DS mod command.
Okay. So what happened to the accounts when you ran it with the CSV file?
Well, they were all disabled.
Okay. They're
And
disabled
none
by
of them had
default.
none of them had any passwords, and they didn't have the default username set.
So why would it work with a making it enable to begin with?
Because of the requirements, you had to have a password in order to enable the
Because of
account.
your group policy stuff that you had way up the number.
Right.
Okay. So is there another way you could have done this without actually having to run 2 different batch files?
Manually.
I could have pointed from the initial batch file, I could have pointed over to another batch file, I suppose.
But that's still 2 batch files.
Or entered the second DS mod commands into the initial batch file after it runs the 2 CSV files. I could have had it then go immediately into the DS mod commands.
So that means you're making it do 2 different things, right? 2 different functionalities, even if you pause between and give it time to update whatever else off of there. Is there another way in which you can go and add in those accounts, which also adds in the passwords or configure what you need to overcome the limitation of a CSV file? There's another type of file you could have used to help overcome the limitation of the CSV file.
The only one I know of is a batch file using DS add and plugging in the appropriate commands.
You guys look up LDIF at all?
Never touched on that.
Okay, so you had password requirements of 10 characters, right?
Right.
Was that for the whole entire force, or was that on per subnet that you needed, or per domain?
Domain wide.
It's domain-wide?
Yes.
Okay, so you got how many domains then? 2?
Mm-hmm.
2 main one, one's D'Amico, one's
Yeah.
Pico?
It was Pico, yeah.
Okay.
And
So-
since this came down from Tomiko, we're assuming that this is also Tomiko's corporate password policy.
Okay, then where did you link that policy to? At which level did you link that policy to?
The domain level.
The domain level itself?
Yes.
Okay, so when you went into Group Policy Management Console, you saw both Pico and Tomiko domain in there?
Well, we had no control over the Tomiko domain at all. It was pre-set up.
It had local and Pico Play, but
Okay, so when you went to the Group Policy, all you saw was the Pico, which
Yeah.
what you guys are dealing with off there.
Right.
Okay, so you didn't attach it at that point, did you?
attach it to.
The Tomiko domain?
No, no.
Okay, The
We-
assumption
we-
is that it's going to be
at-
attached by the
at the
IT
level-
above.
Yeah, at the level we're at, we don't actually handle any permissions on Tomiko level.
Okay. So you had two DHCP servers
Correct.
on there. Where were those sitting? In which subnets? Are they on the same subnet or are they?
On the same subnet in the server room.
Okay, so two DHCP server on the same subnet.
Actually, we had 3
Yeah, actually, yeah, we did have a DHCP server in the warehouse.
in the warehouse.
Okay. All right, was it handing out, was it completely separate by itself, only for the warehouse functionalities and not
Yes,
anything
yes.
else?
Yeah, but it did have a relay agent to come back over if it needed to, if it went down.
Okay, for the warehouse?
Yeah, we were done.
So in your DHCP servers, then how many scopes did you have?
We had
Was it 3 main scopes?
three
4?
main scopes.
Was it 3 in the warehouse? I don't remember.
I think it was 3.
No, I had,
Four total.
there was
Okay.
4 total, yeah, in the
Total.
server room and all 3
Okay.
floors of the office
Okay.
building. The warehouse had its own DHCP. I did it all in one super.
So you had 6 subnets total, right?
Yes.
How did you configure, so one subnet's gonna be on the warehouse, right?
Yes.
So you got down to 5. How did you configure your DHCP for the other 5 subnets?
Well, the server was static.
Right.
3 of them were
So
dynamic, 2 of
that
them were
subnet
static.
didn't even need a DHCP to mess with. So we just had the.
But there were
3
8
floors.
subnets. We,
Made available.
8 available.
Right.
We used one for the server room, those were all set statically, and then the clients would draw from their own prospective floor.
Okay, so the server room subnet was all static, so you didn't have that scope in there at all. Right, so we're down to 4. So on the DHCP server, with the exception of the scope that you put for the relay agent capabilities for the warehouse, what were the other scopes that you put into the DHCP server? Because you got 4 other subnets in there, how are they getting IP addresses?
We just
It was the 3 floors.
So did you use, because you mentioned you did
3 floors in the warehouse.
super scoping, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, why were you doing the super scoping? What were you doing there?
Because one was set up, so do you want to make a super scope? I said, sure.
And actually,
Super was better than
Yeah.
regular.
for the requirements, we only created one actual floor that was set dynamically.
Okay, so 1 floor is, okay, so now you got 2 DHCP servers, you did an 80/20.
Right.
In theory, yeah.
Okay, so your 80/20 would be one DHCP server is going to hold 1 scope of addresses, right? The other DHCP server is going to hold a different scope of address, if you do an 80/20 between the 2 of them.
Right.
Okay, now, coming from, let's say, subnet 3, and I got to get an IP address. Okay, what did you set up for me to get from subnet 3 to those DHCP servers get an IP address?
Oh, the relay agent through the router.
Okay, so in the relay agent, which which DHCP server did you put in the relay agent?
To the main
This
DHCP.
DHCP server or this DHCP server or both? Because you got 2 sitting there.
Oh, yeah, we put both in.
Put both of them in there,
Yeah.
so that way? Okay. So you got both DHCP servers sitting there, it's going there, getting IP addresses and stuff off of there. Did you actually reserve any IP addresses, or anything in particular? Or is everything either
No,
static or
printers,
dynamic?
the printers on
Yeah,
each.
printers.
Printers?
Yeah.
Did the printers get it from DHCP or did the printers get?
Printers
Printers
were set static.
There's a static?
Mhm.
So all your printers, you're gonna set as static addresses in there. Okay, and what happens if a printer moves to a different subnet?
Maybe you have to go in.
We go in and
You'll have to
change.
go and make sure you do that?